The air in the Starlight Lounge was a suffocating shroud, thick with the stale ghosts of 1,000 forgotten cigarettes and the cloying sweetness of cheap perfume. It clung to my skin, seeped into my lungs, a tangible representation of the desperation that pulsed beneath the garish neon glow. Every laugh was a little too loud, every clink of ice a little too sharp, echoing the frantic beat of my own heart against my ribs. My gaze, wide and unblinking, was fixed on the table, on the delicate tremor in Rose's hand as she pushed the folded napkin, the marker, across the scarred formica. It wasn't just paper, it was a fragment of my soul, signed away with the ink of another woman's recklessness. I saw the faint sheen of sweat on Rose's brow, the way her lips, usually so full of vivacious lies, were now pressed into a thin, bloodless line. She wouldn't meet my eyes, couldn't. The moment stretched, taut as a wire about to snap, as the napkin slid, inch by agonizing inch, into the waiting shadow of Vincent's hand. And then, his gaze, a physical thing, detached itself from the flimsy proof of ownership and pierced me. It was a brutal clarity, colder than the ice in the half-empty glasses around us, sharper than any razor. Steel. Yes, that was it. His eyes were polished steel, reflecting nothing, revealing everything. They stripped away my composure, my flimsy hopes, leaving me bare and trembling in a silence only I could hear. There was no flicker of recognition, no hint of compassion, only a possessive assessment that made my breath catch, a phantom hand closing around my throat. I was suddenly, chillingly aware of every curve of my body, every beat of my pulse, as if he were cataloging me, itemizing my very essence. A low, guttural growl of pleasure rumbled deep within my chest, a primal instinct that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. He saw the tremor in my lips, the fear coiling in my gut, and something ancient in his eyes darkened, deepened. He didn't care about Rose's debt, he cared about the collateral. About me. Slowly, deliberately, he raised the lucky strike from his lips, exhaling a plume of smoke that momentarily obscured his predatory smile. The cherry glowed a malevolent red, a tiny inferno against the gloom, before he brought it down, crushing it with a soft, final hiss into the overflowing ashtray. The smell of burnt tobacco mingled with my rising dread. The sound was deceptively small, yet it resonated like a death knell in the cavern of my chest. His voice, when it came, was a low rasp, a velvet-wrapped threat that vibrated through the floorboards and directly into my bones. "She's mine now." 4 words. That was all it took. 4 simple, brutal syllables to shatter my world, to sever me from everything I knew, everything I thought I was. They weren't just words, they were chains forging themselves around my wrists, an invisible collar tightening around my neck. My fate, sealed not with a judge's gavel, but with a gambler's marker and a gangster's gaze. Rose's desperation, her pathetic plea for one more chance, had bought me a one-way ticket to hell. And as Vincent's eyes, burning with a cold, infernal light, promised a journey from which there would be no return, a chilling, desperate part of me wondered if I was already half in love with the fire. The black Cadillac, a sleek, predatory beast, ate the city streets whole. Each thrum of its powerful engine beneath me was a resonant pulse, a countdown to a fate I hadn't chosen. The plush leather, so unlike anything I'd ever known, felt less like comfort and more like a silken tether, binding me tighter with every mile. Streetlights blurred into streaks of liquid gold and desperate neon, a final, fleeting glimpse of a world I'd once navigated with my own 2 feet, my own meager currency. Now, I was currency, a transaction made in the shadowed backrooms of a life I'd only ever glimpsed from the outside. High above the restless pulse of the East River, the penthouse loomed, a glass and steel eyrie perched precariously at the very edge of the sky. The elevator ascent was a dizzying rush, a silent, relentless climb that severed me from the familiar ground, from every last shred of my former self. When the doors whispered open, they unveiled a dominion of cool marble and hushed opulence. A vast expanse unfurled before me, a panorama of glittering city lights stretching to infinity, indifferent to the turmoil churning within my chest. This was not a home, it was a declaration. Every polished surface, every heavy velvet drape pooling onto the floor, every glint of chrome on an impossibly intricate fixture screamed his power, his reach, his absolute dominion. The air itself was thick with it, a heady, complex perfume that clung to the silk sheets draped across a monstrous bed, a scent of money and cold, possessive luxury that suffocated the air out of my lungs. It wasn't the sweet, earthy aroma of my old life, the comforting scent of worn pages and brewing coffee. This was the smell of ownership, of a space meticulously crafted not for solace, but for display. My footsteps, usually light and quick, felt heavy and alien against the plush, silent carpet. I paced, a caged animal in a golden prison, the vastness of the space amplifying the frantic beat of my heart. The distant, languid notes of a jazz saxophone drifted from the unseen sound system, a smooth, mocking soundtrack to my unraveling. It was too elegant, too sophisticated, too utterly unbothered by the raw terror that clawed at my throat. It spoke of leisurely evenings, of champagne flutes clinking, of a world so far removed from my hand-to-mouth existence that it felt like a cruel joke. How could how could she have so casually wagered my future, my very being, on the turn of a card, on the roll of a dice? Her laughter, once a familiar comfort, now echoed in my memory, tainted by betrayal, shrill with a reckless disregard that chilled me to the bone. The thought was a bitter gall in my mouth, a poison seeping into every pore. Was I truly so disposable? So easily traded for a debt, a fleeting moment of desperation in the hazy glow of a casino floor? I ran a hand over the impossibly smooth silk of the sheets, cool and slick beneath my fingers. They promised comfort, yet offered none, only a stark reminder of the invisible bars that now enclosed me. Each exquisite detail of this gilded cage was a fresh wound, a testament to the inescapable reality that I was no longer my own. The city lights outside, once a beacon of possibility, now felt like 1,000 watchful eyes, witnesses to my unwilling surrender. My new life had begun, not with a choice, but with a silent, terrifying decree, delivered in the opulent silence of a penthouse suite, suspended between earth and sky, utterly alone. The summons had been a cold whisper on the wind, a command that brooked no refusal. My name, spoken with an authority that scraped against my very soul, echoing in the opulent silence of a world I'd only ever glimpsed from afar. Now, I was being dragged into its gilded cage, a moth to a dangerously seductive flame. Every step towards the towering edifice, towards the penthouse suite, felt like a descent into an exquisitely crafted hell. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow, each floor clicking by a reminder of the increasing distance between me and anything resembling freedom. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. The doors parted with a hushed sigh, revealing a vista that stole the breath from my lungs. It wasn't just an office, it was a throne room carved from glass and steel, suspended above the sprawling metropolis. The city, a glittering tapestry of lights and shadows, stretched endlessly behind him, a testament to his dominion. And there he was, Vincent, seated behind a desk of polished mahogany, so dark it absorbed the light. He was an immovable object in a world of constant motion. He didn't rise. He didn't even shift. His posture was one of quiet, absolute power, a predator at rest. The air in the room was thick with his presence, an intoxicating blend of expensive leather, aged whiskey, and something subtly, dangerously masculine that pricked at my senses, warning and alluring all at once. His gaze, when it finally lifted, was like a physical touch, cool, precise, dissecting. It stripped away my composure, laid bare every tremor of fear, every flicker of defiance I tried to hide. He saw it all. I felt like a specimen under his microscope, my vulnerabilities exposed, ready to be catalogued and exploited. My throat tightened, a dry knot of dread. He was the king, and I, merely a pawn, summoned to hear my fate from his lips. A chill snaked its way down my spine, despite the warmth of the room. It was the chill of inevitable doom, wrapped in silk. Lana, his voice was a low murmur, a velvet-wrapped steel blade. Each syllable was perfectly weighted, leaving no room for misinterpretation, no space for argument. You understand why you are here. It wasn't a question. Your father's debts, his marker, as he so carelessly called it, have come due. And you, my dear, are the collateral. The words hung in the air, heavy and final, crushing the last vestiges of hope I clung to. He leaned forward just fractionally, a minuscule shift that nonetheless commanded absolute attention. Your new existence begins now. You will reside under my roof. You will attend the functions I deem appropriate. You will be seen where I wish you to be seen. You are, for all intents and purposes, mine. A temporary arrangement, of course. Until the debt is repaid. Or until I decide otherwise. My blood ran cold, then hot with a simmering indignation. Mine? The word echoed, a brand seared into my skin. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to shatter the pristine silence of this gilded cage. But the cold, hard truth of his words pinned me down. Escape? Where would I go? He owned the city, he owned the very air I breathed, or so it felt. Every possible avenue of defiance, every thought of rebellion, evaporated under the unwavering intensity of his gaze. It was a fool's errand, a death wish. To fight him openly would not just be futile, it would be catastrophic. He wasn't just threatening consequences, he was promising them with the quiet certainty of a man who always delivered. I swallowed, the movement a raw scrape against my constricted throat. The fear was a bitter taste on my tongue, but beneath it, a strange, dangerous current began to stir. A realization. He was not just a captor, he was a force of nature, primal and undeniable. And I, caught in his orbit, was helpless. My eyes, defiant only in their silent plea, locked with his. I saw no pity, only a dark, possessive gleam that promised a future both terrifying and, to my shame, inexplicably captivating. I was his, for now, and the weight of that truth settled over me, chilling me to the bone, yet stirring a reluctant pulse in the darkest corners of my soul. The game had begun, and I was merely a piece, waiting for the king to make his next move. The days, once distinct markers of a life lived, had bled into an opulent, suffocating blur. Each dawn brought a fresh silken gown laid out, a new gourmet breakfast served on crystal and china, a fresh torture of enforced indulgence. The scent of exotic flowers, heavy and cloying, permeated the air of the sprawling mansion, a constant reminder of the gilded cage I now inhabited. My skin, accustomed to rougher fabrics and bracing air, now felt hypersensitive under the ceaseless caress of silk and cashmere. Each touch a phantom hand, a reminder of the unseen master who dictated every thread, every meal, every breath. Beyond the polished windows, the city pulsed with a vibrant, untamed energy I could only observe from the back of a dark, tinted sedan. The hum of the engine was a lullaby of captivity, the plush leather seats a throne of gilded misery. Drivers, silent and unreadable, steered me through bustling boulevards and winding alleys, always a shadow, always a presence. I'd press my forehead against the cool glass, tracing the lives I couldn't touch. A woman laughing freely at a street vendor's stall. A child chasing pigeons in a sun-drenched park. Lovers entwined on a bench, oblivious to the world. Each fleeting glimpse was a dagger to my soul, a stark contrast to my own hollow existence. I was a phantom, haunting the edges of a world that refused to acknowledge my presence, sealed away in a cocoon of false freedom. My ears, sharpened by desperation, became instruments of espionage. I'd linger a moment too long by a half-open door, straining to catch the low murmur of hushed phone calls, the clipped, decisive tones of Vincent's men as they moved through the house like predators in their own territory. Their boots, heavy and precise, echoed through the vast marble halls, each step a testament to their loyalty, their unwavering vigilance. I watched them come and go, their faces impassive, their eyes missing nothing. A casual glance from a maid as she straightened a vase, the almost imperceptible shift in a guard's stance as I passed. Each was a microaggression, a tiny, chilling reminder that I was perpetually under watch. Every gesture, every flicker of emotion, every private moment, was not my own. The air itself seemed to hum with unspoken rules, the unseen threads of a web spun by Vincent. I searched for the edges of my cage, for the weakest points, for a crack in the impenetrable facade. My mind, once a sanctuary of thought, was now a constant battleground, torn between the desire for freedom and the unsettling, magnetic pull of the man who held me captive. His absence was a presence, his power a tangible weight in every room, every silent corridor. I would catch my reflection in antique mirrors, a stranger staring back, eyes wide with a peculiar blend of fear and defiance, a hunger for something beyond this gilded prison. The city outside continued its vibrant dance, a symphony of life I craved with a ferocity that threatened to consume me. A life I could only yearn for from behind the impenetrable veil of Vincent's watchful, possessive gaze. The echo of the slammed door still vibrated through the silent penthouse, a physical blow that had rattled the very foundations of her carefully constructed peace. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a gilded cage. Vincent's fury, usually a contained, simmering heat, had erupted tonight, leaving behind a chilling void. The air itself felt thin, charged with the aftershock of his unleashed power. She found herself drawn, inexorably, to the heavy oak door of his study. It stood like a silent sentinel, a barrier between her and the true darkness that resided within him. A darkness she was only just beginning to comprehend, yet found herself strangely, terrifyingly compelled by. Her bare feet whispered across the cool marble, each step a reluctant surrender to an impulse she couldn't name. Curiosity? Fear? A morbid fascination with the precipice she found herself on? Pressing her ear to the cold, unyielding wood, she strained. The faint murmur from within was a low, dangerous hum, like a predator purring before the kill. Then, fragments. Sharp, brutal shards of conversation that sliced through the luxurious quiet. Vincent's voice, a gravelly whisper that somehow held more menace than any shout. Insolence, payment is due, one way or another. The words were guttural, stripped bare of any civility. A different voice, reedy and desperate, cut off abruptly, followed by a sound she couldn't quite place, a muffled thud, a sharp intake of breath. Her blood ran cold. He was talking about a deal gone sour. Not a business deal in the conventional sense, not stocks or mergers. This was a deal forged in shadows, steeped in coercion. The brutal reality of his labor rackets, she realized with a sickening lurch, was not just a theoretical concept. It was a tangible, crushing force. He wasn't just a wealthy man, he was a titan of a different empire, one built on the sweat and fear of broken men. Her mind flashed to the ledger she'd glimpsed on his desk earlier, a thick, leather-bound tome. Not neat columns of corporate assets, but scrawled names, dates, and numbers. She remembered the cold dread that had seeped into her bones as her gaze lingered on a particularly large sum beside a faded signature. Each entry, she now knew, represented a life bent, a spirit crushed, a debt enforced with unimaginable severity. The pristine white pages of the ledger were stained, not with ink, but with the invisible residue of fear and unspoken threats. The gilded world of the penthouse, the opulent furnishings, the breathtaking city lights spread out below. It was all a veneer. Beneath it throbbed a pulsing, savage heart, fueled by the suffering of others. And she, Lana, was now inextricably bound to it, part of its dark, glittering machinery. The realization was a tightening knot in her stomach, a cold hand squeezing her heart. She was no longer just an observer, an unsuspecting woman swept into a dangerous man's orbit. She was a piece on his board, an unwilling participant in a game where the stakes were lives, and the rules were written in blood and fear. A shiver, both of terror and something disturbingly akin to morbid thrill, snaked down her spine. The air was thick with the faint scent of his cologne, mingling now with the imagined metallic tang of something far more sinister. And she, inexplicably, found herself still pressing closer, desperate to hear more, even as it promised to shatter her. The city lights blurred into streaks of liquid gold and molten silver against the rain-streaked pane, each drop a tiny, shimmering tear on the glass. I stood there, a phantom against the vast, indifferent skyline, the chill of the window seeping through my thin silk robe, a stark counterpoint to the restless fire flickering deep within my veins. Outside, the world wept, a symphony of urban sorrow that mirrored the quiet turmoil in my own soul. I was a captive, yes, but never truly broken, always searching for the sliver of sky beyond the gilded cage. And then, I felt him. Not a sound, not a breath, but a change in the very density of the air, a subtle shift in the gravitational pull of the room. Vincent. He materialized behind me, a silent, imposing shadow, his presence a dark, intricate tapestry woven with power and a predatory grace. The delicate scent of oud and expensive leather, unmistakably him, wrapped around me like a silken snare, tightening with each beat of my suddenly frantic heart. It wasn't just a smell, it was a declaration, a warning. The comfortable silence of my solitude shattered, replaced by an electric hum, raw and dangerous, vibrating between us. I didn't turn, couldn't. To meet his gaze would be to acknowledge the invisible tether that bound us, to concede the fight I was still waging, even if only in the defiant clench of my jaw. My reflection stared back, a woman teetering on the precipice of something terrifyingly beautiful, a glint of rebellion in her eyes. I felt his breath ghost against my hair, a whisper of heat that sent a shiver, both of dread and an unwelcome thrill, down my spine. Still staring at the escape routes, little bird? His voice, a low rumble like distant thunder, wasn't a question, but an observation. It held no demand, no overt threat, yet it stripped me bare. You are quite the study, aren't you? So much fire, so much defiance, burning bright against the encroaching night. My breath hitched. He saw me, truly saw me, not just the woman he'd claimed, but the untamed spirit he hadn't quite managed to break. It was more unsettling than any command, more intimate than any touch. The words were a caress, a challenge, and a promise all at once. My fingers tightened on the cool marble sill, my knuckles white. You like a challenge, I take it, I managed, my voice a mere thread, but laced with a surprising edge of insolence. I finally turned, slowly, deliberately, meeting his eyes. They were obsidian pools, reflecting the city's fragmented light, but deeper, darker, holding galaxies of unspoken intent. And there, in their depths, I saw it. A flicker, not of anger, not of simple ownership, but something far more potent, more primal. It was a hunger, an unsettlingly profound possessiveness that went beyond the material, delving into the very core of my being. It wasn't love, not yet, certainly. Love was soft, yielding, forgiving. This was raw, animal awareness, a predator recognizing its prey, not just for the kill, but for the thrill of the hunt, for the exquisite possession. It was a silent challenge, a game of wills played out in the heavy, perfumed air, where every look, every word, every ragged breath was a move on the board. And I, against all reason, felt a dangerous spark ignite within me, an answering hunger that both terrified and exhilarated. The rain outside continued its mournful song, but inside, a new storm was brewing, electric and inescapable. The precise, elegant script on the cream stationery felt like a venomous caress, a silken threat delivered with a chilling grace. It was a summons, not an invitation, and the young bellhop's trembling hand, the way his eyes darted like trapped birds, spoke volumes more than the sparse, single line of text. He hadn't just delivered a note, he had borne a message from the abyss, and now, I was compelled to answer. The alley was a cul-de-sac of shadows and damp, decaying brick, a forgotten artery behind the glittering facade of the city. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of rain and the faint, sweet decay of unseen refuse. Every whisper of the wind, every distant siren, was a torment, tightening the knot of dread that had coiled in my stomach the moment I read the name on the envelope. I knew who I would find here. I felt her presence, a cold, persistent ache in an old wound. Then, she materialized from the deepest pool of shadow, a specter ripped from the grave of my past. Rose. The name tasted like ash on my tongue. Her beauty, once vibrant and audacious, was now a ravaged landscape of sharp angles and haunted hollows. Her eyes, those captivating emeralds, were sunken, rimmed with a desperation that clawed at the edges of my resolve. Her clothes hung from her skeletal frame, a mockery of the effortless elegance she once exuded. A gasp caught in my throat, half horror, half a perverse, morbid fascination. Lana, her voice was a hoarse whisper, raw and fragile, yet it carried an undertone of the old manipulation, a practiced plea. I knew you'd come. My fists clenched, nails digging into my palms. How dared she? How dared she resurface, after everything? The wound of her betrayal, a jagged scar I thought had long since faded, ripped open, fresh and bleeding. It pulsed with a pain so intense it momentarily eclipsed the fear. "What do you want, Rose?" My voice was colder, sharper than I intended, laced with an anger that had been simmering, dormant, for years. She took a tentative step forward, her gaunt hand reaching, then faltering. I need your help. More help. I need money, Lana." He cut me off. "He won't even look at me." Her gaze, full of frantic pleading, locked onto mine. "You're with him now. You can get it. Vincent will listen to you." The name was a shard of ice in my gut, a bitter taste on my tongue. Vincent. How dared she invoke his name, knowing the delicate, perilous balance of my existence with him? My anger flared, a bonfire consuming the last vestiges of my self-control. This wasn't just an old ghost, this was a live wire, sparking dangerously close to a powder keg. "You think I can just ask Vincent?" I spat, the words laced with a contempt that surprised even myself. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What you're doing?" The very air around us seemed to hum with his unseen presence. Vincent didn't just have eyes and ears, he had a sixth sense for betrayal, for secrets kept in the dark. He had warned me, with a terrifying calm, about the consequences should Rose ever become a problem again. His network was vast, insidious, reaching into every corner of this city, every shadowed alley. He would know. Already, he would know. A shiver, not of cold, but of pure terror, traced a path down my spine. The cold logic of my predicament clicked into place with a horrifying finality. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a detonation. Rose, in her pathetic, selfish desperation, hadn't just put her own life at risk. She had just signed both our death warrants. The ghost of my past had returned, not to haunt me, but to drag me down into the abyss with her. The humid night air was a suffocating shroud, pressing in from all sides, thick and heavy like a physical weight. It clung to my skin, a clammy promise of the darkness that now defined my existence. Standing before Vincent, the world narrowed to the space between us, a charged void where my fate, and Rose's, hung by the thinnest thread. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate bird trapped in a cage of bone, each beat a silent scream. His eyes, twin pools of shadowed obsidian, were unreadable, revealing nothing of the thoughts that surely coiled behind them. He simply watched me, a predator observing its prey, and the intensity of his gaze was a physical touch, both terrifying and undeniably thrilling. A shiver, not entirely of fear, traced its way down my spine. It was Rose's face, pale and tear-streaked, that had finally pushed me to this precipice. Her voice, thin and reedy with terror, echoed in my memory, a ghost in the hallowed halls of my resolve. "Please, Lana, please save me." It wasn't a plea I could ignore, not when it was my sister, my other half, caught in the inferno of this man's world. My own survival, my freedom, suddenly meant nothing if it meant her damnation. The words had been a gamble, each one plucked from a soul already raw and bleeding, laid bare for the King of Shadows. "Let her go," I'd said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor that shook my core. It was a lie, the steadiness, a cruel masquerade. Let her walk away, unburdened, untouched by this, by you. And I will stay. The offer had tasted like ash on my tongue, the ultimate surrender. I was trading one cage for another, binding myself to a gilded prison, but this time, it was by my own hand, for a purpose greater than myself. This was the cost of a life, the price of a soul I held dearer than my own. This was my last, desperate play, a fragment of my self-worth clutched tight, refusing to be entirely consumed. The silence that followed stretched, taut and agonizing, like a violin string pulled to breaking point. Every nerve ending in my body screamed, waiting for the snap. Had I miscalculated? Had I offered too little, or too much? Would he simply laugh, dismiss my futile attempt at negotiation, and take us both? The thought was a cold dread that seeped into my bones. Then, he moved, a slow, deliberate step that closed the minuscule distance between us, his presence looming, consuming. The air thrummed with his power, a dark, intoxicating current that pulled at me, even as I fought to resist. He reached out, his long fingers tracing the line of my jaw, a touch that branded rather than soothed. His thumb brushed over my lower lip, a possessive caress that stole the breath from my lungs. "Clever girl," he murmured, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through me. It was a quiet pronouncement, yet it echoed with the weight of an unbreakable vow. "She will be free. She will never know what you've done for her. And you." His gaze, now alight with a predatory gleam, burned into mine, claiming every hidden corner of my being. "You, Lana, are mine. Completely. Every breath, every beat of that defiant heart. You belong to me, now and forever." My breath hitched. Relief warred with a terrifying sense of inevitability. He had accepted. He had taken my gamble and raised the stakes to an impossible height. My freedom, that elusive dream, was still just that, a dream. But I had carved out a space, however small, in the king's dark domain. A space defined by my sacrifice, by my fierce love, and by his terrifying, all-encompassing possessiveness. This was my new reality. The cage had merely changed its shape, its bars now forged of his will, and the chilling, seductive promise of his claim.